I got some deep questions because everything you're saying is so fantastic. And I want to be able to transfer the knowledge to more modern day today, which obviously you've made tremendous shifts from that time frame to today. And I do want to talk about your book and, Amazon of what you're doing today. But I think the biggest benefit for anybody that listens, and sometimes I take a selfish approach because I'm always curious about these things too, is, at that time, it sounds like you hit it spot on, right at the right time, where things were sort of evolving in that scene. You didn't have access, the supply of the actual ecstasy was no longer there. And so I'm triangulating this from like a business standpoint, where people that in modern day are attempting to jump into business, there's a couple of elements that are similar in nature to have a big hit like that, a big home run, right? Like good timing, for example, plus the less regulated infrastructure kind of maybe the business and then the hub being there in SoCal. So if today's entrepreneur is attempting to jump into business, how much of that is transferable to today in the sense that how it worked for you in the 90s, having that big instant hit in your teens to make $1 billion, if you're not Zuckerberg building Facebook, how realistic is that today in today's day and age for someone to have that same thought? I get the idea. We buy into the idea and the theory a lot, but the actuality of it has to have a couple things really sort of connect at the same time to have that massive success. You agree or disagree?
Yes and no. So
Please
let me
share.
tell you,
Yeah.
let me tell you what it is. Like real estate's a good example. What I teach, particularly to my students now, is foundational thinking. We teach that you need to have multiple streams of revenue no matter what you're doing. And one of those streams should be real estate that we always talk about. And we could talk about this towards the end if you want to. But with real estate, it doesn't matter where the market is. You can always find an opportunity. There's people who get rich in every market. Market's hot, there's people making money flipping. Sure, they might be holding a hot potato, but if they know what they're doing, they'll make enough money, and the last hot potato they hold or get stuck with, balances out with all the wins that they had before that. In general, in life, the sum total of your winnings just has to exceed by a good margin the sum total of your losses. So you can have one big win and a lot of little losses and they get canceled out. You can have a lot of little wins and one big loss and it can get canceled out. So in very general terms, that's the way it is. The other thing that I would mention is that there is always an opportunity for you to succeed, but you have to be in the flow. And by that, there's a great book by this guy, Csikszentmihalyi. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. It's always a very difficult name, called Flow. And he talks about being in the flow state. Stephen Kotner, in his book, Art of the Impossible or The Rise of Superman, talks about how these extreme athletes get into these flow states where they slow down time and they're just there. And I look back to my time back in the 90s when I had this astronomical success, literally hundreds of millions of dollars floating around on yachts with supermodels, and the lifestyles that you see on Instagram, the bullshit ones where it's like, I got a Lambo, check out all my shit, right? Like private jet, and you realize the dude paid $150 to get a picture in a private jet set, right? And the girls are all hired models, and it's all rented lifestyle. It's all bullshit. Yeah. Like I lived that fucking life in the 90s because I had that kind of wealth back in those days. And the interesting part about that is when you succeed and when people succeed, they're in the flow. And you have to be able to get yourself in a flow state, to have all your ducks in a row. And look, you can't be in a flow state if you're fucking selling your hours. You can't be in a flow state if you're struggling to make ends meet, if you don't know where your next meal is going to come from, if you don't know if you're going to get your baby's diapers this week or not, if you can't take your girl out for a meal because you broke all the time. It's not going to work. You will not be in a flow state. So the first step for anybody is stabilization. Once you get stabilized, then you have to figure out how to optimize and get yourself into a flow state. In those days, Remember, I came from nothing. I had nothing to lose. And every day for me was, I didn't need much. So my requirements were very small. For me to be comfortable was, I had nothing. I was sleeping in an empty building, eating relish and ketchup from a hot dog stand, and I was fucking fine. Yep. It was okay. It was okay. And then I got stable. I made a little bit of money. And then I started focusing on this optimization part, which is, how do you get into the flow? And I realized that there were a few things that got me in that flow state. And once I got into that flow state, it was like I couldn't fucking keep deals from coming to me. Everywhere I turned, there was a deal coming at me. There was a talk show that they wanted me to be on. There was a $1 million deal. I talk about one time where I fell asleep on I talk about it in my book, where I was in the office. I fell asleep in my office. The week before, I just came in a crazy fit, and I was like, furniture is fucking last year. We're done with furniture. I'm going to take out all the fucking furniture. I ordered these custom floor meditation chairs, and I said, everybody's sitting on the fucking floor. That's it. And we're not going to have fucking tables. This is going to be a revolutionary fucking, a terrible idea. People hated me for it. But I'd fallen asleep on one of these like beanbag things on the floor. Woke up, there was a pile of papers. I had this beautiful white pit bull, albino pit bull, sweetheart of a dog. She knocked over the stack of papers, and I was like, fuck. I was waking up in the office. I was like, shit, all my meetings are coming in. I grabbed the first piece of paper that she had bitten through, and it was a check for $1 million. It was a fucking check for $1 million. And it was like a month old, and it was sitting there, and I just hadn't fucking cashed it. They've gotten their product or whatever, and I just hadn't cashed it. It was sitting there. That was how much money we had flowing around. There was a check for $1 million, and I just threw it right back on the pile. I think it took me months to even get to it because it was so low on my list of priorities. My priorities at that time was exactly what I said, creating an impact. And I was so in the flow that the $1 million didn't matter. There was more millions everywhere else. And I would just go out there. So the key is, if you can get into that flow, there's nothing that you can't do. Finding out how you get into that flow and that sweet spot, that's the tricky part. So these are great generalities. And again, people like Csikszentmihalyi and Stephen Kotner have written great books on flow state. But once you get to know yourself and you can get into this state where you have optimal performance and you have absolute flow, and you know how to be at the right place at the right time, and there's an art to it. There's an art. We call it synchronicity. I write about it in my book. But if you can get into that flow, deals will come to you. The art of making money is not about getting out there and pushing your shit down somebody's throat. That's bullshit. That's what you see on TV. That's what these guys say. Oh, you say these lines and somebody will buy it from you. You say this line, you can pick up 10 girls. It's all bullshit. The art of making money is about what Professor Cialdini in his book Persuasion, he talks about it. He calls it persuasion. It's about setting it up so those opportunities come to you. And when you hit that flow, you hit those targets and stuff starts happening around you. And I can't explain it. And I know people that are billionaires. I know millionaires. I know a couple billionaires. And I sit down with them all the time. We have dinner, we have drinks, and I'm constantly asking them, like, how do you know when you're in that state? And they can't explain it. They can't explain why. One guy I know is a real estate guy, and he's making hundreds of millions of dollars. And the guy who went to school with him, the exact same upbringing, same neighborhood, same stuff. And that guy's, he's banking 150 grand a year, while my buddy's making hundreds of millions. What's the difference? My buddy knows how to get into the flow state. He knows how to optimize and then go after those opportunities. And not only that, he's able to minimize the noise so he can see clearly. And I think those things are the things that help you build that roadmap. And then you have to think to yourself, is what I'm doing solving an important enough problem? A guy who's on my book, Jay Samit, wrote this book, Disrupt You, and he wrote a new book called Future Proofing You. And he talks about that. He talks about, oh, you got Jay's book? Oh, love it. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Jay,
love it.
Jay's a good friend of mine. Yeah. And he talks about, are you solving a big enough problem? Are you thinking big enough? because there's lots of problems out there to be solved. So to answer your question, a very long about fucking Shaahin goes on a rant way, the answer is, yeah, you just got to find that problem. We just had, we're just going through COVID. I thought we'd fucking be out of COVID, but we're still in COVID. Yeah. And we're thinking, well, it was very unfortunate and very sad. And a lot of people lost lives and a lot of people got sick and it was a tragedy. But a lot of people also fucking got rich. A lot of people continue to get rich. Amazon had the best years ever in history. As being an Amazon seller and somebody who's expert at Amazon, I can vouch for that. All our Amazon companies went gangbusters during this time. So even in the hardest of times, you can succeed just if you're in this flow state. And that's what I talk about in my book. And I give a path and a 3-part system for how you can get into that flow state and capitalize on those opportunities when you get there.